Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome again to Friday Drinks on rather rainy Friday. It's been raining this last week, which is great, especially for the farmers. But also, it just brings a better weather. You know, it's cooler and more interesting. I think we become more livelier. I think when it's hot, I think I've just decided that in my life I don't like the hot weather. What do you think?
Yeah, it was getting quite hot, and the rains. It's good to have them, but the problem is it's been raining in patches.
Oh yeah, we've gone for like 30 days without rain.
Yes,
So
and there's some places that are desperately in need of of the rains. And look, it's good if some other parts of the countries actually are receiving some rainfall. I'm sure. And we hope that maybe the rest of the country will also be blessed with that, because we need that
we
desperately.
desperately need the rains. Yeah, that's true.
It may not
but
save
one
the-
thing. One thing we don't desperately need of is our 6-year-old. He's away.
No, so we actually had to send him for some days.
Yeah.
Just give
So it's
some
just
break.
you and I. This is the first time we've actually done this show, and it's just you and I, the adults of the show.
Very sober, and look, let's get what our viewers think. Do they prefer a sober one? But the last time we tried it, people were like, we want Rufaro back, you remember? I mean, actually it was about whether he should continue on his sabbatical from Wise Waters, and pretty much everyone was saying, no, we want a Rufaro is drinking, because
Yeah.
it brings everything about
He's
him.
more lucid when he's drunk.
Yeah.
But I think I sort of prefer him in his sober state.
So wherever he is, guys, if you come across Rufaro, please be nice to him. He's our 6-year-old. We still love him, and I think this show will do us with a drunk.
But I must say, I do miss Rufaro on this particular topic, because I think that he's got very interesting comments on the subject matter. So I miss him as far as that's concerned.
Certainly. So look, it could be maybe one of a few sort of episodes that will look at the issue, given how heated the discussions are. So there will always be an opportunity for Rufaro to come and add his voice to the discussions. But look,
His jabs and anecdotes are, always very interesting. But because Rufaro is away, we thought we make the drink section a little bit interesting. So we're actually going to make a mojito. And I don't know how many of you can make a virgin mojito. That's a mocktail. And I'm going to try and make one. And you're going to judge whether or not it's good. Right?
Yeah.
So we've got all the ingredients. Unfortunately, we've got home honey. It should actually be syrup or salt, but I'm sure this will do. Right? And I'm just going to try and make it. So we've got lime juice, and we've got club soda and ice and fresh mint. It's lovely. I mean, just smell it, eh? I always find it very, very interesting. So let's get the ice going. In the meantime, Ziva, why don't you tell us a little bit about your farming exploits? What's happening there?
Well, the farming that you do that's dependent on the rains is always a problem in a drought here like we have right now. So obviously, I've got some crops on the ground, and they are, you'd say most of them are at different stages of wilting, which is not it's not really unique to me. It's every farmer that is growing crops that are rain fed, and maybe it's an opportunity for our investment bankers out there to bring investors, fund irrigation and etc. But it looks like it's a write-off this year, certainly.
And Kumusha, what's happening there?
It's look, it's interesting because I was there like 2 weeks ago. Some parts of our Kumusha is raining because anyway, Chipinge is a fun area. There's the Eastern Highland side, and also then there's the Low Veld side. So the Eastern Highland side always have some rains. So when I went there, it was raining. But obviously, as you would expect, the Low Veld side was so dry. I mean, there was no life there. But look, as long as there are some parts of the district that are receiving some rains, it means it won't be a total disaster. You know, people can always move from one village to another looking for some grains and survival.
Okay.
Pretty depressing, but I don't think that's what we are trying to do on today's show. We just
Well, you know, it was pretty heated on X. You know, especially with data and what's happening with data, and that's the subject matter I just want to introduce. But before we do that, I just want you to try out my virgin mojito.
Yeah, I must say the version that you tried, the version that you made last week, it was okay. It wasn't as sophisticated as this one. I was worried about my tummy, but I didn't have any issues. I didn't have issues, so it meant in terms of whatever the chemistry and whatever processes of the things that we mixed, it wasn't poisonous. So
Yeah.
this looks lovely.
Try to tell me what you think.
Yeah.
It's honey, but you know, if you're gonna try this at home, please use syrup.
Yeah, the taste is good. It's it's something new for me, but yeah, it tastes really nice.
It does, eh? Yeah, I think so. Well, there we go. And I think we need it for today, because today's show is going to be a very interesting one. And we've got a number of subject matters that we need to deal with. The most important one being the data prices, and whether or not Starlink should be introduced, and what's happening with Portraz and data prices across the region. And we'll talk about that, and we'll respond to a lot of your comments on X. I think it was quite heated. You know, some of the people did have facts, and they were interesting facts, and I think that I was wrong here and there. Not entirely, but you know, sometimes I was wrong.
It doesn't happen so often for Tinashe to admit it was wrong. I don't know what you guys did on X to get Tinashe to...
I'll tell you where I was wrong, but I think we'll get into it. But the most important thing that is, we've tried to do this poll, and I'll tell you why we tried to do this poll, is to try to get what the lay of the land looks like, just to hear what our viewers and people on X. Obviously, it's not representative of everybody, but this just gives us an idea. And the way I want to start this is not necessarily with how people have responded, but I want us to discuss how Econet in particular. So I'm just picking up Econet, but it could very well be any of the businesses that are incessantly attacked by facts sometimes, and also by incendiary comments here and there. Do you think that Econet and others have responded to this inquiry the best way that they could?
So I think maybe before I answer that, I would say what you are getting in terms of people asking questions on the price of data, I think is quite genuine. And it's an inquiry. These are questions that have been there for some time now, where the price, the cost of data has actually been out of sync, and for most people, they feel that maybe we are overpaying for the data that we are using in this country. And I think the onus is on the operators themselves to actually unpack to their consumers, to the public, what goes into the pricing of their services. So
when you say that data in Zimbabwe is expensive, where is that coming from? Why are people saying data is expensive?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So you'd find that whereas some are coming up with data, comparing it with other countries, I think for most of them it's more inward looking. So it's expensive relative to people's pockets. And that's why I also believe that maybe it's actually not a data issue. It's just a general high cost of services of products in the country because of the uniqueness of the Zimbabwean economy, some features of it that you don't find in other countries. So obviously,
but there were lots of people that were comparing data prices in Zimbabwe to elsewhere across the continent.
I saw that, and there was a very interesting graph which actually the findings of that were not really in support of that view. If anything, it was showing that actually our data tends to be on the cheaper side, whether you agree or disagree.
But is that true or not?
These were numbers coming from Potras, so I would have to.
But you as an analyst, what do you think?
I would say the biggest problem when it comes to trying to compare Zim with other markets is actually other external issues. For example, the exchange rate. So when you say the cost of data in Zimbabwe is this much in US dollars, what rate are you using, and how stable and consistent is that rate? So it means. So
are you saying a lot of the trolls that we find on X, they don't know this? That everything is determined on.
No, they know. They know. But this is X.
So why the future? Why this anger?
This is X. These are the streets. People out there are given to fighting. They are always looking for a victim to to jump onto and destroy them as it were. But I don't think the average person on X is that ignorant. Most of them actually have got access to this data.
I mean, it's the same problem that we've talked about as far as your formal retailers and your tuck shops. That sometimes prices are expensive in US dollars in your formal retailers, the shops, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's the US dollar price. It's just a reflection of the distortions in the exchange rate.
And there's no better place to see that than maybe the informal sector. So if you go to the tuck shops, that's when at that point you are talking about actually becomes very clear that if you take out the distortions of the currencies, the prices here are quite competitive.
And
comparable. But unfortunately, if you are a formal player, you are limited in terms of what you can do. So you have to stick to.
So why is Econet, Telecel, Net1, why are they not coming out and explaining this to us, that actually it's an exchange rate distortion?
I would say it's also a sensitive issue. I mean, you are a form of business, and generally our local businesses are not given to defending themselves publicly, because they are saying this attack is not coming from the authorities. Or so if there's something that they have to discuss with the authorities, they prefer to do it in behind closed doors. So if this is happening on X, unfortunately, it's not a platform where your typical formal business can actually engage directly. And
this is new media. This is the new world. This is how markets and consumers operate. Everything is happening in the public arena, and that public arena happens to be X. And corporates cannot fold their arms as you're doing and ignore what's actually happening on X. Because the agenda is being set on X.
Yeah, but also maybe the corporates are saying, when you look at the typical X user, what percentage of your market do they represent?
That's actually a very good point.
So would you want to spend your time trying to address that market when the market that really you are getting some money from doesn't have issues with you? And you see, I think one thing that we forget is actually on X, there are content creators, so everyone is turning into a content creator. So even a very general kind of issue, because you've got a page, you've got a following, you tend to see that people always try to create some controversy so that you can get more likes and more people sharing and talking about you. So you can't really use that as the basis.
As the yardstick. I think the reality is most people, I mean, you had Net1, you had Telecel, you've got Econet, but most people are using Econet. Right? That's the reality that we have.
Exactly. So I think...
whether they're happy or not is a secondary question, but the fact that that's the one where customers are, is because that's the one that's actually performing. The others are, as the saying goes, dead as a dodo. And we all know what killed them. We all know what happened to Parinyatwa, and that's perhaps what's happening to, Telecel and Net1.
So look, the issue about are they happy or not? I mean, there are three operators. So I think there's some options there. The fact that maybe the other two don't stand out as viable options, it just tells you the economics and also what these businesses have gone through. So look, I think people have got legitimate reasons to be questioning prices of any kind of product or services, and it's also it's some good feedback to the corporates themselves, obviously, to the extent that it's helpful, to the extent that maybe it can help them to actually change the cost mix and how they do business.
Or just pretty much how they address the market.
How they address the market. So they can't ignore it.
They can't ignore the
and
market.
And it also comes with the territory. For example, if you're a big player, so everything bad that comes, it has to be on you. So people can't be complaining about Telecel or Net1 because,
they're now irrelevant.
Yeah, exactly. So it's an interesting one. But
the other one that I want you to comment on is Starlink. What impact do you think Starlink? So obviously we all agree Starlink must operate, and it's not good for government of Zimbabwe to stop it in any way. Even if there are many producers, even if they're Chinese, the Chinese version of Starlink, what we want in the marketplace is we can have as many as possible. There's nothing to limit anyone. Consumer choice is paramount. But what do you think the impact of Starlink would be?
So I think before that, I would want to, the issue about the government of Zimbabwe is not allowing Starlink. I'm not sure about it because the regulator, Potras, he has been consistently saying that, yes, Starlink approached them and they gave them some to-do sort of list, which if Starlink was to fulfill, they'll be considered and be given the license to operate. We haven't heard from Starlink disputing that. Yeah, so obviously we know that space is highly regulated.
So it's just a question of time.
Yeah, I think it's a question of time. Also, it's a question of, there are a lot of dynamics when you try to look at it, that Starlink is an American company, and before the partial lifting of sanctions, the general attitude of big American corporations establishing themselves in Zimbabwe and etc. So I think it's just a matter of time. It's a matter of time.
And how about the issue that actually it's Econet and primarily Econet that's actually stopping Starlink from coming in because they don't want that competition?
Oh, so it doesn't really, those. So on one side we have got this view that okay, there's a regulator. So Econet is not a regulator, and I think to the extent that it makes sense for the regulator to admit more players into the market.
And actually earn more.
And earn more. I don't see them being on the side of Econet. And when you actually try to look at the history, generally when you try to assess the relationship between Econet and the authorities, I don't get a sense that maybe they've got a relationship where Econet could actually be getting favors. If anything, it's a bit, tensy, and it's a pure business relationship, but I don't think it's a friendly one, which would make authorities want to actually protect Econet.
Then, the authorities have gone one further and have actually protected Net1 and they've protected Telecel in as far as the licensing fees are concerned, because it's only Econet that actually pays those licensing fees. How do consumers think that, because those licensing fees were in US dollars, if you remember, I think it's 10 years. But Net1 and Telecel didn't pay those fees. Why is it that they're still unable to perform? Because if they were performing, they could give Econet a run for their money.
So, I mean, it's just like anything that's being run as a public institution. So, I think I think if you look at a Telesur when it was actually still in private hands, I mean, it was small, but they were actually punching way above their weight. They were bringing in some sort of innovations. They were taking time to try and increase their market share, but they were visible and viable. And then they change in shareholding. They become part of government, and everything just
it collapses
south.
to
everything just went south. So I think, but the narrative that maybe there's the mobile operators, in particular Econet, are being protected has been there for the longest time. But I think one would want to do some research and say generally, is the telecom space one that can allow maybe 20 players, 30 players, and etc. You tend to see that in most markets there are 3-4 kind of dominant players. Then there'll be other players as well, because of the amount of investment that you have
that's
to put.
Actually required.
That is required. And when you look at the amount of investment and how quickly technology changes, people always forget. I mean, the payback period for a typical base station or a typical telecoms equipment is much shorter. It has to be shorter, because if you stretch it for the longest time, it means
your technology will be obsolete.
Yeah,
soon
it
enough.
will be obsolete before you have even recouped your
investment.
Yeah, so it's actually part of the business model.
It's interesting that you say that, because if you look at the risk profiling, which nobody ever talks about, Zimbabwe compared to everywhere else, I think the risk premium in Zimbabwe is, if we look at what Afreximbank is charging us, it's upwards of 15%. That's just the risk premium for investing in Zimbabwe. So if you look at the risk premium for investing in South Africa or Botswana, it's far less. And those are costs that people like Econet have to recoup. But also, more importantly, it's only Econet that's actually invested. Net1 and Telesur have not made the investment, and that's why they're struggling.
Yeah, so I think it makes sense for the regulators. I'm sure that's why they're keeping it the way it is.
So just get into the impact of Starlink.
So I think it will be positive. I don't see mobile operators as just dependent on data. There are so many things that they can actually do, and you see, if you just step back maybe 5 or 10 years ago, data was actually, it was an idea. It was in its infancy, and these businesses were dependent mostly on voice, SMS, and etc. So, then data became the new thing. And it just shows you how quickly changing things can actually, how things can actually change quite quickly when it comes to that space. I still believe that there's space for a Starlink kind of service, and
it's complementary.
Yeah, yes, and because these guys are mostly into mobile broadband, and people are still mobile. You see, and you can actually work with that as it were. Okay. So the players that are only into data, obviously, it means they would have to tweak the business model to try and compete at that level. And I'm thinking, if they come in as a regulated entity, the same weight of regulation would actually affect them. To a point where, comparably, the other players will still be competitive. Look at it this way. Like I've said, the cost of doing business generally in Zimbabwe is very, very high. So you don't expect that maybe if a Starlink is to come, they will charge the same, kind of rate they're charging in other countries. Because Zim, the taxes, the cost of doing this and that may
just adds up.
Yeah, it adds up. And also for the regulator, obviously, if they are anticipating that business is going to move away from the traditional data providers, they might want to get more from Starlink.
An extra tax.
Exactly.
On Starlink.
An extra tax.
Be careful of what you wish for. Yeah. That's a very good point, because we have to move on. Let's go to the poll, which sort of agrees with what you're saying. because I think that the shrill voices are far and in between. But we took a poll, and this was the question. Obviously, it's not representative, it's just a small sample, but it gives us color of what's actually happening on X. And the question was, sorry, could you go down a bit? So what price are you as a customer willing to pay for data? And to explain the three choices, it was number one, market forces in US dollar and ZW, or the SADC average price in USD, and then ZW data falls away, or Portraz actually sets the price in ZWL, which is what's actually currently happening. And the results are very clear. I think 55% actually say, let the market decide. So people actually think that it's up to supply and demand forces. It's got nothing to do with what's happening regionally or internationally, but it should purely be what is the supply and demand in that particular market, which I think is what we are representing. We're representative of market forces. And if you think about it, the price of bananas in Baremsika is the price of bananas in Baremsika. It does not infer what the price of bananas is in Rekini in Blueair. Whatever the price of bananas is in Blueair is the price of bananas in Blueair. It's supply and demand in Blueair. And in Harare, in Baremsika, is the supply and demand. And I think that 55% of the people that have been polled actually agree with us. And I think those are the people that we actually represent. Then there's a 38% of the sample who actually believe that, yes, let's actually have a SADC average, but not ZWL, because I think ZWL is where the distortions come. And I think that this is where I was saying that perhaps, I'm willing to hear this argument, that let's have the SADC average, and let's have a risk premium if we must, whatever it is, but it's stable. Because I think that's what people want. They want some sort of stability. Right now, it's not stable. Even the US dollar prices change continuously, primarily because of the exchange rate that's actually used. This is what I was wrong about. Because I actually thought that these people that are calling for data prices to fall were quite a bit. If you read the comments, and these are people who troll, who come out very strong. But it turns out they're actually in the minority. They're not in the majority. I think there's a silent majority that believes that they want the services that Econet provides, and they want the market to open up, and they want Telecel to actually do well. Net want to do well. It's only good. It's only better. Unfortunately, MTN will not come to Zimbabwe. If MTN were to come to Zimbabwe to court you, MTN would have left a long time ago. That's our reality. So what we need to do is to improve on the business environment, because if we improve the economic environment, then perhaps we can get more investment into Telecel. I think government has no business in Telecel. They should really sell it to a private operator, and hopefully that private operator would give Econet a run for their money. What do you think of the poll results so far?
Obviously, maybe we are biased because we are pro-market most of the times, and but I agree with it, because when you start having controls, you don't have, so you would not know where to stop. So if you are controlling the price of data, what are you going to do to the price of another service, another product? And the moment you start having a culture of control, then it becomes very difficult. Shortages, and the quality of service actually deteriorates. And in fact, we actually sort of experienced it fairly recently because of like when you say data is actually high, the mobile operators actually say it's suboptimal, and it's making it very difficult for them to invest more. And obviously, if they are not investing more, it means the quality of service is going to be affected. Yeah. So what would you rather have?
Expensive data, or no data at all?
Yes, or no data at all, or it's always up and down. You're actually more down than you're up. So I believe that the market must be allowed to freely, find some settlement in terms of the price that makes sense. The SADC average, what does it really mean? Because the moment you say that, it means then you have to apply. It means we have to have a similar kind of base in terms of how we run our
salaries,
healthcare, the monetary side, the fiscals and things like that. That's not where we are. I mean, just look at a very simple example. I mean, like if you are to the cost of a typical baki coming into Zimbabwe. So probably in South Africa it could be like $27,000 worth. The moment it crosses the border, it's almost 60,000 because there's 100%.
And if it's above 150,
yes,
you get a surcharge on that as well.
Exactly. So when you say,
so it's not comparable.
So when you're saying SADC average, for example, in that vehicle example I've given, how are you going to achieve that? So we are SADC, we're in the same region, but we are different. We have different economies that are operating in a different way. I think when you're looking at the prices, we have to look at them and say, do they make, like in the Zimbabwean sense, so the pure demand and supply, if one feels that maybe this is too much, obviously they drop out of that product, maybe go to the next level. And I don't know. So people are making a case that data has become a basic
right.
A basic right.
UN, it's been defined by UN as a human right.
It has to be.
Some go as far as calling it a human right.
Yeah. So look, I acknowledge that data is important, but I think also even in that, I think there's the positioning depends on the amount of data. I mean, there are different sections of communities. We have got different sort of requirements. So, for example, if someone just want data for their WhatsApp and that kind of thing, so that they get by, the amount of data they want, I think it's actually fairly affordable. But if someone is saying, no, 100 gig must be $10, the moment you start demanding 100 gig, surely there must be some economic activity.
Because human right is watching movies.
You see, so you want to be able to download a 4K movie from this data, and your only cost there is $5. I mean, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely correct there. Okay, so now we have to move on. I think we've exhausted this topic in particular. And we have to talk about Zig, Ziggy, the new currency. I think that the rumor mill right across Harare is quite clear. Everybody's talking about this new currency. And I thought that, let's just talk about it just a little and hear your thoughts on it. So maybe just to refresh us again, what is Zig as it currently stands?
So it's a currency, if you want, a Zim dollar replacement, which is going to be linked to the gold price. So in a way, it's so
it's indexed to gold.
It's indexed to gold.
It's indexed to the auction rate, the going auction rate,
and to the gold
and to the gold price.
To the gold price. And
so it's indexed and not backed by gold.
It's not backed by gold. The gold is not there. It's indexed by, and obviously there's a thinking that maybe this one is going to bring some stability.
Would it bring stability? What do you think the impact would be?
The US dollar failed to bring some stability because we then started. I mean, the US dollar.
We bastardized the US dollar.
Exactly.
So you're saying if we can bastardize the US dollar,
just imagine Zig. I know how difficult it is even to have conversations about you have got a certain version of USD, which you can do this and that with, and then compare it with a Zig. Things can you just wake up one day, things have.
Okay. So Ranga, I'm going to put you on the spot because I want us to really drill down on how corporates and how individuals should respond to this. Suppose tomorrow we wake up and it's regulated, right? Because that's what fiat is. It's now imposed on us. Nostro goes away, and we're now using Zig, and there's a market rate for Zig.
What do you mean Nostro goes away? It can't go away. Its money is there.
Yeah, the money is there, but it no longer becomes legal tender.
Okay, like locally.
Locally. So okay. I'm working with a scenario. So scenario one is where you take away Nostro. It's no longer legal tender, but it's converted into Zig at market rate, at whatever the market rate is, the interbank rate is, and now we are purely on ZIG that is somewhat indexed and somewhat bagged, but we're not really sure. And we change one or two things as far as the Reserve Bank Act is concerned. And we have a new governor who, for all intents and purposes, has been a very successful banker and leader in our society, who has the ear of number one. Given that scenario, what do you think will happen?
So I still have got a problem with what happens to the nostrils because they are there. So the nostrils are...
They're converted. So you wake up one morning and it's converted.
It's converted.
To ZIG.
It's more like there was $1,000 US. It's here.
Yes.
It has been converted.
Yes.
So, but the $1,000 is still there somewhere. Who has got the $1,000 in the first place?
Well, it's taken by Reserve Bank.
Yeah, that's where the problem is. that's where the problem is. So overnight, the central bank has got 2.5 billion. From where? How do you even communicate? How do you even start to think about that scenario?
Well, it becomes their reserves. So the idea is, if we take out the real US dollars in the market, they become Reserve Bank reserves. So now Reserve Bank has reserves, and whenever you want, you go through an open market, and Reserve Bank will give you the US dollars. So to go back to your example of $1,000 US, so the $1,000 was in your bank account, you owned it, but now Reserve Bank has it. So if you want the $1,000 because you need to import or whatever you need to do, Reserve Bank will give you the $1,000 at whatever the going market rate is. But now, if you want to do any local business, you no longer need your $1,000. You use ZIG. I'm not a proponent. I'm not a proponent of this, but I'm just playing it out. Let's play it out as a scenario. Do you think it will work or it won't work? Because now suddenly Reserve Bank has the reserves.
So it will not work. So I think the biggest problem that we have is on that conversion, where RBZ is today. So the conversion is happening tomorrow. On this day, us, the market players, we are owning 2.5 billion US dollars of nostro. And RBZ maybe have got no nostro. The next day, RBZ has got 2.5 billion of nostro. And they've
replaced it
with ZIG.
ZIG.
You know what has just happened? So I don't think they will do that. I hope they will not do that.
No, it's a scenario.
I hope they do.
It's a scenario. We're just playing out. So, I'm not saying that central bank is going to do this.
They'll not do that.
It's just a scenario. Under that scenario, what do you think?
I think it will cause more chaos.
It will cause more chaos.
Yeah, it cause more chaos. And I'm just seeing that on some screen on Bloomberg saying Reserve Bank has expropriated 2.5 billion from market players. And because
to be fair, there's only about $1 billion US, and the other billion is credit money. So it's no straw, but it's actually credit. It's what banks have lent, and it doesn't really matter whether it's ZIG or whatever. It's in the system. If it's nostro, it's under the restrictions of nostro. But yeah. To be fair enough, it's $1 billion. Let's move to the second scenario.
So I have no problem with a new currency or a ZIG
that runs in parallel.
That's running parallel to the US dollars. I've got a problem with the nostro balances being expropriated by the RBZ in one form or another. I have no issues if the central bank is to come and say, you know what, for purposes of local transactions, we are using ZIG exclusively, but you still keep your nostro balances.
But it's only a matter. It's a matter of time, right? Because remember, we must ask ourselves, I think where the pressure is coming from. So the pressure is coming from already. Reserve Bank is expropriating 25%, right? And after 120 days, you must liquidate whatever is in your nostro. It must be liquidated. And the problem right now has been to liquidate at sub-market rate. So if the central bank comes and he says, well, now you can liquidate at market rate, and 25% moves to 50% or to 100%, But anyway, I don't want to labor too much on that scenario.
So if it's market rate, then there's no problem, because I think even a bigger portion of the US dollar stock that we have, even as individual, we use it internally, you know. So I want to pay for my kids' fees, and if I'm renting to my a landlord, and I want to pay for this service, so I really wouldn't mind actually, as I'm making those payments, I make them in ZiG, but the source of my money is actually what USD is, as long as the rate is what is market rate. Yeah.
So you're saying the banks must be allowed to keep US dollars,
Yes.
and the sanctity of US dollars must be there, and it must run in parallel. So if ZiG is to be introduced, it must run in parallel with. Well, that's no different from the current scenario, right?
Yeah, I think the difference now is
because then you get into
so
the problem.
they're coming in, and maybe you're saying there's a new governor coming in, and the discipline on the ZiG itself. So obviously you are going to launch it at some exchange rate, and also the stock of money which is there is going to be determined by economic activity and things like that. So no one is creating new ZiGs.
Okay,
every day.
all right.
So
let's move on, because I want us to deal with scenario 2, which you've already done. Which is scenario 2 is the run in parallel, which is no different from today. And all you're saying is, well, perhaps it might be a little better because you now have a governor who will be more disciplined.
hopefully,
Well, okay.
because we don't know.
And
He's
then-
never been a governor before.
And then scenario 3 is when you keep your nostril, but surrender requirements from now onwards 100%. So you keep whatever is in the nostril, whatever you've had, you can keep that in your account. But going forward,
Okay, so the new
regime
Okay.
is whatever, if you're an exporter, you're now getting ZiG, but you're getting ZiG at market rate. Would it work?
So look, if you do that, you also then extend that scenario and say whenever any economic player wants USDs for their
They just come back into the interbank market,
and they'll be able to get
and they'll be able to get it at the interbank market.
that's most perfect.
That's perfect.
If we can achieve
Okay,
that.
so I think I
Because that's
disagree because
that's basically what you're seeing in other countries where
other countries have reserves. That's an issue that Zimbabweans always forget. That other countries, typically you should have 8 months cover. So on average, you must have
if you
8 months cover of
if you are,
imports.
what if they don't have reserves, and this system has started working. On day one, you go to your bank and say, you know what, I want $5,000. I've got this ZiG. They give you 5,000, and you do what you have to do. You're going on an international trip, and someone does that a week later, 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later. Will people really care about the reserves? Or maybe it's only when that system stops working.
Okay, so the reason why you need reserves, let's take an independent country X, is if I'm an investor and I'm coming into your country, the first thing is I would ask is, do you guys have reserves? And you will say, we've got 8 months worth of reserves.
Okay.
Then
Fair
I
enough.
have some sort of confidence that whatever money I put in today, in 8 months, I can actually do a futures trade. In 8 months' time, I can get my money back because these guys are running an 8-month rolling reserve. Now, if you don't have reserve, I don't know what the rate will be in 8 months' time, especially when we import more than we export. When especially we don't have the fiscal and the monetary discipline. It's not there. So it's a different case if I'm going to Kenya, and I still think that the Kenyans don't have the fiscal and monetary discipline, but I look at their reserves. I go to Russia, I look at their reserves. Russia has 2 years worth of reserves. My risk is that they can change the rules. But so far, they've actually been very disciplined about making sure that the rules remain the same. I have some sort of confidence. And that's the number I use, knowing that I can get my money back. Whereas today, if you go into the Reserve Bank, if you change your money today at 4 o'clock, at 5 o'clock, if you go back to the same bank at 5 o'clock, and ask for your money, the rate would have moved. You get far less of your money than you sold.
So I think what's coming out from your argument is our problem is not just a monetary one. It's I think it goes beyond monetary issues to fiscal issues. So the issue of the discipline that you're talking about, but I think you need to start from somewhere. So maybe we just need to pick a day, pick a point, and say this is where you're starting from. And when you've got these measures they have to cut across the entire spectrum. So it's not just.
So you need to bring in the discipline, the fiscal,
discipline
monetary,
and everything. So
everything.
So it.
But
stretches,
do you see that happening?
It stretches all the way even to dealing with your debt, your arrears, and things like that.
Okay.
You
Do you
know?
see that happening? Do you think we've got the discipline to actually implement?
I think so far we have not been able to.
We don't have a credible history.
We don't have, but I don't think that maybe is totally and entirely not possible.
Okay.
It may not be achieved maybe the next sooner as we need. But
so I'm going to give you the third scenario, and the third scenario is Armageddon.
What happens there? Now we're feeling like the world is crashing now.
So the third scenario is we did our budget expecting exports to go up. We did our budget not expecting the drought to be as bad as it is. We did our fiscal planning expecting gold production to actually go up, not down. But the reality is it's gone the other way around. We had elections last year, and the expenditure that we spent as far as elections is concerned, that's still being rolled over. It hasn't really come through. All that expenditure, it hasn't really come through. So we've got a big hole. That's our reality. So if you're the governor or if you're Ministry of Finance, you're looking at it and you're saying, you know what, Ranga, that's well and good what you're saying, and I would want to go. But the reality is I've got this big hole and I'm not earning as much as I used to. What do? I only have one thing, and there's one thing that I can do, which is to expropriate.
And then you're going to create another even bigger hole. So
it's okay if I push it. We've been down this road before. We push it, we kick the can down the road.
Yeah, look.
We have another blocked funds.
I think
we have another blocked funds.
And we have got, we still have got the results for, when we took that road, the consequences of that, we're still feeling them right now. So, look, I know that maybe this year is actually a very difficult one with all those issues that you have highlighted, but I don't think we can solve the problems by creating a new set of problems. So maybe it means they may need to scale down on certain expenses. There are certain things that like you're in a drought here. You could possibly shelve certain things. For example, the infrastructure project that you are.
But we've got a SADC summit. We can't let that go.
Yeah, well, look, maybe you'd say that probably that might be necessary. But how about doing Harare to Chirundu and maybe finishing some of the dam project that we've started? I think even at household level, if you are worried about your day-to-day basics, even if you had a project that had been running, okay, you're building this mansion, you can shelve it. Your family would understand you, It doesn't make sense to be telling them that, there's no sugar, there's no milk. In the meantime, whatever little amount that is there, you are allocating it to the guy who is painting the walls and things like that.
All right, thanks.
So we can scale down. Let's scale down. It's a difficult year. We scale down. We just focus on survival.
Okay.
And then maybe come 2025, we'll be able to resume with some of our ambitious projects.
All right, fantastic. So thank you very much for that, Ranga. So the final thing that I want us to talk about is the drought, because actually there's an SOS that has been sent out there for drought relief. It's clear SADC has brought about a report, and this is affecting right across SADC region, where we've gone for the longest period, which is over 30 days without any rain whatsoever. And we need the moisture. So deprived of the moisture, a lot of the plants are literally wilted away and they're gone. So we'll have a drought here. Our relations with the international community are not at the best at this particular moment in time. Do you think that government is ready? And what are they going to do? Because we don't have the funding. If you look at our budget, there was a small allocation, but they were still expecting, no more rainfall, right? But it's clear that we don't have the funding. It's also clear that the exchange rate has moved severely against us. And it's clear that our reserves are not as robust as we thought they were. What is government going to do?
So you asked if they're ready. It's a very difficult one to answer, but I think it's obvious that, even when we had fantastic years, the last year or two, we had problems. We had all these problems with our currencies, problems in terms of things not just balancing. So obviously this has created a big, big problem where I think it's just a matter of time before we just make a declaration to the rest of the world that we need some food. I saw in today's paper, where there was a story which says maybe it's too early to declare the drought a national disaster.
But it's coming.
But it's coming. I think
Yeah.
the sooner
I think that's
I think the sooner we do that, the better, because it's a drought. It's not like someone created it.
Yeah, I think that's the reality
Yeah.
that business have to come to terms with, that we are in a drought here, and it's going to be a highly distressing environment. So now when you look at if farming doesn't perform, it means we're actually looking at negative growth rate rather than the positive growth rate that a lot of pundits were putting out there, or government itself more particularly, where they were looking at 3.5% growth. It means we're not going to get that 3.5%
it's
growth.
going to be negative, and a very substantial negative if you look at it. We knew that we're going to have below normal rainfall season, but I don't think anyone had sort of prepared for what we've actually
The extent of...
Yeah, it's record beating. So the dry February that we experienced, they say it actually beat. The last time we had such a dry February was in 1981. Yeah. So.
And in 1982-83, we had IMF support.
Yes.
Whereas this time around, IMF is not going to be supportive.
Yeah, look,
none of the multilateral organizations.
I don't know what measures, what triggers them to support, but given that the majority of the SADC region and other countries in Central Africa are probably also facing this drought scourge, I think they might need to step up. But when you look around, it's probably only South Africa that is expected to have
a normal harvest.
A normal harvest. Zambia, they've already declared.
But they have good relations with their multilateral organizations. So if you look at Ghana,
it's
Kenya,
a hunger and starvation. It's not about relations. It's not like
it's more from USAID.
Yeah, humanitarian kind
aid.
of aid. It's not like we are asking for investments into our factories and the mining operations. Yeah. Okay. Even if they don't like us, I don't think they wish us dead.
So for business, what should we do? This is quite.
For business, it's just survival. Business, households, it's one and the same thing, because how agriculture actually affect a bigger part of what we do, like what constitutes our bigger sort of corporates. They have got some linkages to what happens on the agri side. So it's actually time to be conserving our resources, to be defending your balance sheet, to just ensure that maybe you are well placed for any kind of change in fortunes. So whatever you're selling, so it means the disposable incomes are going to be affected in a big way. A part of what we're seeing as informal sector was actually farmers, like the tobacco the households that are into tobacco, more than 100,000 of them, and others that were doing other crops like cotton and etc. So that market is going to be, it won't be there this year. So no matter whatever product we are selling, I think volumes are going to come under increasing pressure.
Could all this pressure, if you think about it, is this the reason why the monetary statement has been delayed as much as it has? Because I'm sure they're trying to figure it out, and it's just becoming more and more difficult to figure out what they need to do because they've got so many headwinds. Extraordinary times, indeed.
I wouldn't know. I don't think so, though, because, it's a budget. So, you are allowed to change it. So even if they are probably not sure, they haven't done
what they're not sure of is what do we announce to the market?
You just announce
because it has to be drastic.
You just announce whatever you have. and say in your preamble, say we are in a drought year. We are not quite sure the extent of grain shortage that we're going to have, but we know that we have got a serious shortage. And right now, the focus is actually on mobilizing resources to ensure that the vulnerable members of our section of our society is actually protected. I saw that document is saying about 3 million people
are vulnerable.
Are vulnerable, and the majority of them are children. So I think that's whatever policy, monetary or fiscal, will have to be
we need to now address that.
Yes, we need to address that. And it's a fluid kind of situation. It doesn't mean that if you make an announcement today, then we have to wait for you maybe 6 months from now. Things can just change, deteriorate quite quickly. So obviously you are allowed to, it's more like wartime sort of, where the leader has to be making statements on a sort of a regular basis.
Continuously.
Yeah, assuring people that, no, don't worry, things are under control.
Well, they're actually telling us that the economy is growing and it's actually a $47 billion economy.
No, you don't want to be told that the economy is growing. Just drive. Go drive. Take a drive to Tare, another drive to Blawayo. Growth, you see growth. You feel it. It's not there. The economy is actually shrinking in a big way. And the drought is actually a major shock. You don't even call it a decline. It's unbelievable, So we can't keep on talking about a growing economy in a country that is actually facing starvation.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's no growth there. Let's just agree.
On that said note, we come to an end. But I think that what I take from this is government should heed the advice that we're better off buttoning down the hatches now and getting ourselves ready for what's coming and be prepared and send out the SOS as quickly as possible so that we do get the debt relief that we actually require. Because 3 million individuals are actually vulnerable at this point in time. And, it can easily turn into a disaster. And I think that people will be very understanding if government can come through and, everybody understands what. So
even for us, we know there's a drought and what it means, but sometimes you also still need some leadership in terms of preparing you mentally. And so if you were thinking on being extravagant with them,
this is not the time.
Yeah, this is not the time with the resources that we have. So whether it's a corporate or individual level, you had some expansion sort of mindset. Probably this is not the right time. Maybe every hand would need all the hands on the deck, trying to make sure that we are helping alleviate the effects of the drought. It's like what they do again in wartime, where they'll just come.
Everybody gets together.
They say, no, stop whatever you're manufacturing there. Everyone has to adapt their production processes and start manufacturing things that we need
so that
for the whole economy. So we pretty much want to be producing and to be doing our business for the survival of all of us, because this is going to be a very, very difficult time.
Yeah. On that note, take heed. I think very good points coming from Ranga. Today you were particularly Very good. I must say, very incisive,
Look,
very thoughtful.
I didn't have. We didn't have a 6-year-old. So if things were to go wrong, we don't have anyone to blame. You see, so we are adults. We just had to take it to that level.
Fantastic. I had a wonderful time and very useful. Something to think about. Please continue to comment in our comment section and let us know your thoughts and what perhaps we need to do. I think it calls for a particular type of leadership that recognizes where exactly we are, as an economy, and can see us through. What we just need to do is to survive this season. Otherwise, have yourself a wonderful afternoon, and we are certainly going to have that. What do you think of my virgin mojito?
So I would love another glass. Yeah, it's quite good.
Yeah, I'm quite proud of myself.
Yeah. You've done very well.
Well,
I'm sure it's good that Rufaro is not here, and but I'm sure he's watching that. We have upped the game in his absence.
Absolutely, it's not just whiskey, but we're making very sophisticated cocktails.
And I could see him screaming like, "What are you doing to my glasses?"
Oh yeah, we borrowed Rufaro's glasses.
Yeah, thanks so much for
this
cocktail.
Thank you very much. Have yourself a wonderful week. Cheers.